Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my sister demands to be paid for the labor she did for us on Christmas. My husband, who's 36, and I, 38 female, hosted Christmas this year at our house. My 20 living close family members, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, have stayed with us from the 18th and will continue until tomorrow. A further 8 people joined us yesterday for Christmas dinner and a Christmas party. My older brother, who's 40, and his husband, who's 53, usually help me out with the Christmas dinner, and they did this year as well, but there were a few more guests than usual, and we needed more hands on deck, so I asked my younger sister, who's 30, if she would help. She agreed, if reluctantly, once she saw how much needed to be done, and we all got to work. She muttered when she started that I had better pay her back for this, to which I laughed because I thought it was a joke. There's a very high chance that I misinterpreted this because I do have autism and recognizing sarcasm is not one of my strong points. But she didn't object, so I took my interpretation as the correct one. I was and am incredibly grateful for her help, and I thanked her for it many times. Once the cooking was done and the food was served in our dining room, I made sure to mention the contributions that everyone had made to the meal, by name, as I do every year. My sister then, this morning, just before she was about to leave, everything's packed up in her car, saying goodbye to everyone, asked me how much I was going to pay her. I asked her what she meant, and she said that she had agreed to do it with the idea that she would be paid for it, and she wasn't my slave. I said I wasn't going to pay her because it was a favor. Also, I've done a lot for her during her time here, so if anything, it was her paying me back. She just glared at me and asked again for her money, and I said I don't have anything for her. She didn't ask again and left after telling me that I was a jerk for no reason. We're normally on very good terms, so this was surprising. I don't remember us ever arguing before now, so I think I either did something very wrong or she was in a bad mood because she was hungover and I only did something slightly wrong. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Edit. People do help out in other ways, which is why I went to my sister, because she was the only one who wasn't busy. Not the jerk. I don't even understand this concept. At Christmas, everyone helps out so that everyone can enjoy themselves. The payment is the finished meal that I'm sure your sister partook in. I can't imagine a majority of the adults in my family just sitting around not helping. Everyone is just in and out of the kitchen, cooking, tidying up, looking after the younger kids. Regardless of who's hosting, we all help out. Even me, who's disabled and physically can't help much, I can still do other things that are helpful, like keeping the kids entertained with crayons and paper, or holding a baby so the parents can do things in peace. And I bring stuff that I prepared beforehand. If someone demanded to be paid, I'd laugh too. Then we'd probably point out that everyone helps out and everyone has pitched in buying food. Why should one person get paid for doing what all of us have done to have a nice Christmas together? Ex-mother-in-law is requesting a crazy amount of grandparent visitation. How do I move forward? My ex-mother-in-law has taken me to court for grandparent visitation. Background. My ex was incarcerated October 22nd, and since then, I have allowed visitation around 1 to 2 times a month, including his side of the family in their school activities and extracurriculars, and sent pictures and updates. I also set boundaries at this time. No involving the kids in his case or discussing his case with them, no taking them to visit him, etc. Grandma decided to break some of those boundaries, so I started to limit when and where she could visit. Anyways, all that was going good enough, so Grandma requested every other weekend, Dad's schedule, holidays, vacation time, and daily phone calls. We went to court, and the judge pretty much said it's not Grandma's job to step into Dad's shoes, and it looks like Mom, me, was already allowing visitation, so they're going to have an uphill battle in her courtroom. Judge requested we go to mediation, then we would return to court later this year. Now their attorney has sent me a letter asking for Grandma to have every Sunday from 9 to 5. I don't agree with any weekend visitation time because she's trying to take the kids to visit Dad, and I'm concerned about her communication with the kids, talking bad about me, asking them to delete messages and not show them to me, putting them in the middle of conflict. My oldest told me that they are no longer answering her calls because they're tired of Grandma putting them in the middle of this. I was previously offering visits during the week, dinner dates, going to the mall, etc., but she was declining my offers. At this point, I don't feel comfortable offering any visits until there is a court order and stipulations around communication, prison visitation, etc. But do I need to respond to their attorney? Also, my plan is to try and be fair here, but also protect my kids. Offer limited monthly visitation, 1 to 2 dinners a month, no overnights, plus some holiday time. Offer to update them on events and extend invite to school activities, put boundaries around communication, no visiting the prison, no putting them in the middle of conflict, and I would like to keep my parental decision-making rights that if grandma or her family continue to break these stipulations, that I can cease at any time without filing a modification. Does this seem fair, considering the circumstances? I can't find any information on what a grandparent visitation schedule would look like. Or do I ask the judge to throw this out completely because I was previously offering visits and grandma is clearly a toxic nutcase? Keep offering the weekday visits. Offer dinners with you and the kids, park visits, etc. Save all texts and declinings of the visits. Then you can say, over this time, I offered this amount of visiting opportunities, but she declined them. It will go a long way. Have your kids screenshot all of those messages and send them to you. Add a passcode to their phone so grandma can't delete them. If grandma says mean things, have your daughter write it down, in her own words. They may or may not consider it, but if you present this in parental alienation light, they probably will. You can also contact the prison and the state that if she arrives for a visit with the kids, she is to be denied because she did not get permission to bring them from their legal guardian, and your kids are not allowed to enter the facility. Update. We went to mediation and did not agree. Grandma went from asking for every other weekend to asking for every Sunday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and says that if that's too early, she would pick up the kids Saturday so they could just spend the night. Of course, I said that's not going to happen. I received a letter from their attorney telling me to bring my kids to court because the mediator communicated to him that they could interview the kids. I ignored the request. I submitted a supplemental declaration with exhibits about my concerns with grandma's behaviors. Grandma submitted a response, full-on bashing me, including false accusations. Honestly floored their attorney let that get sent out. When we went back to court, the attorney came up to me in the hallway to explain how court orders work. Told me that a standard order includes language about no derogatory comments about the other party. Yes, I know. He asked me to send the kids to grandma's for Thanksgiving. I said no. They saw them last year for Thanksgiving, and even in custody orders between parents, one parent typically does not get every holiday every year. Then he threatened me with counsel, and the judge would order my kids to come to court. Spoiler, she denied his request. Anyways, the judge seemed very much on my side and did not agree with grandma's behavior. Agreed with my boundaries I set from the beginning and was pleased that one of them included for them to also not talk bad about the kid's father. Overall, I've been reasonable. Judge commented that she feels most of this could be resolved if the petitioner would have reasonable expectations and request for visitation. Well, their attorney asks for an evidentiary hearing. Judge looked annoyed, but from what I understand, if you request it, you pretty much get it unless the court can find good cause to deny the request. Your mother-in-law has lost perspective on reality and her attorney is making bank by trying to draw things out in court. By the time this case is done, one grandkid will be 16 and the other will be 11. That's old enough for a significant contribution of the evidence to come from them. It's not going to be found in mother-in-law's favor and will most likely have the opposite effect of having the kids immensely dislike her. Am I the jerk for kicking my son and his girlfriend out? I, 55 female, have 2 kids, George, who's 31, and Gabrielle, who's 29. Gabrielle recently got engaged, and I'm helping her plan the wedding in my spare time, which the entire family is very excited for, except George. George recently divorced his wife of 7 years, Susanna, 28 female, after he said the spark had died and gone out. They have a set of twins together, Amy and Alice, who are 6, and are trying to set up a healthy co-parenting relationship. Susanna is a great mother to my grandkids, and I was disappointed in George for giving up so fast on their relationship without even trying couples counseling. But it wasn't my business or place to say anything. The drama started when George brought his new girlfriend to dinner at my house. He met his girlfriend, Bethany, who's 25, through a work colleague, and they've been dating for 4 months now. At dinner, Gabrielle and I were discussing flower arrangements, and Bethany felt the need to ask George if he'd ever marry again. George coughed before replying that he'd have to think about it, which Bethany seemed to deflate at. Well, this caused Alice to cry about how she wants Mommy and Daddy to love each other again. George and Bethany just sat there while my granddaughter screamed. After I comforted Alice, I pulled George aside and asked if he was sure about Bethany, which he told me was none of my business. I told him it was my business who he invited into my home and my grandkids' lives, since I've been caring for them in my spare time while he works. He and Susanna have 50-50 custody. George got angry and said it was Gabrielle's fault for mentioning weddings in the first place. I told him to stop acting like a kid and to be happy for his sister. Then Bethany felt the need to insert herself and tell me that she and George were together, no matter how much I liked his ex-wife. After that, I was done with the conversation, and I asked them both to leave. George and Bethany stormed off and left my grandkids at my house at 7 p.m. I had to call Susanna to come get her kids since they had school in the morning, and I was attending a cake tasting with Gabrielle the next day. I feel like I shouldn't have to tell my 31-year-old son to be happy for his sister or argue with a random woman whom I have never met before in my own home. So, am I the jerk? George needs to pay for daycare for a while. OP. The truth is, George can't afford daycare with the child support and alimony he owes Susanna. I agreed to babysit my grandkids as a favor to him. I love my grandkids, but I wish George would appreciate the thousands of dollars I'm saving him each month. Maybe they need to rethink the custody agreement if he can't care for them. OP. If Susanna took on more custody, then George would owe her for more child support, which he's already struggling to afford. Plus, it would mean that Susanna would have to work part-time hours, which isn't really an option in her industry. Alice needs counseling. OP. My husband and I have suggested that George pay for her to get some counseling, but he keeps saying that he needs to save and he can't afford it. What exactly were you asking when you asked if he was sure about Bethany? I was asking if it was really the right time to introduce her to the family, since his daughters are still sensitive about the divorce and are trying to come to terms with it. I didn't ask him in the context of, is Bethany right for you? I meant it as in, are you sure this is the right time to introduce her? I didn't inherently dislike Bethany, but maybe it would have been better to introduce her to my grandkids after they've recovered from the divorce. Did George ask if he could bring Bethany beforehand? OP. George asked me if Bethany could come 20 minutes before he was supposed to arrive, so it's not like I could say no at that point. Update. Bethany came to my house to apologize for how she acted at dinner last week. She told me that she was 2 months pregnant and George had broken up with her after she told him, because he has too much responsibility and didn't want to be in the baby's life. I then spent the better part of 3 hours talking with Bethany about the baby and what she wants. She says she wants to keep the baby even if George refuses to be in their life, and I told her that I would help with childcare if she needs it since she doesn't have any family that live nearby. Before I got angry with George, I thought I would call him and give him a chance to explain. George was angry that Bethany had shown up at his house and insisted that it wasn't his baby. I told him that he should get a paternity test, and he asked me for $500 to cover it since he's struggling. I told George that he needs to figure it out himself since he's about to be a father of 3 and that he better step up and do right by his kids. George then hung up. Well, 2 hours later, I get a call from Susanna to say that George hadn't picked up the kids like he'd previously agreed to, and could she drop them off at my place because she had work. I agreed for her to drop them off, and I tried to call George again. I called 12 times, and they all went to voicemail. I don't know where George is, and I've called his place of employment to try and find out. However, they refuse to tell me anything. I've agreed to watch the kids until Wednesday, and Susanna has reported this incident to the authorities. I assume she plans to file for full custody, and I can't blame her. Right now, I'm worried that George has run off somewhere and done something irresponsible. I'm just disgusted, and I will not be doing him any favors in the future unless he has a very good explanation and accepts some responsibility. This was hard to write, but felt good to get off my chest. Thank you everyone for responding. Hey OP, you're disappointed in your son for giving up on his marriage so easily, and I'll bet dollars to donuts that you and your daughter-in-law have been telling the twins that mommy and daddy are getting back together. I bet you asked your granddaughter to say something like that to help daddy realize that it would make everyone happy. You need to butt out of your kids' personal lives and get a darn hobby. OP, you owe me quite a few donuts then, since you'd be dead wrong. I'll poke my nose in my son's business when he's being an irresponsible parent and not taking accountability for his kids. Bethany is pregnant. It says time to have the twins and he's nowhere to be found. It just proves to me I should have made his personal life even more of my business. Alice caused drama and you exacerbated it by asking about Bethany. OP, Alice is 6 years old. She hardly meant to cause drama, as you put it. She's a 6-year-old kid who doesn't understand why her parents are no longer together. I never asked George if he was sure about Bethany in the context of, is she the one? I meant it in the context of, are you sure this is the right time to introduce her to the kids? I don't care who George ends up dating, but he has kids to think about, and my granddaughters need to come before any random woman he's been seeing for 4 months. Update. People suggested that I give George some space and time to figure things out as a recently divorced father, but after he ran off around 2 months ago, I ended up filing a missing persons report. I talked to George's workplace the day after I filed the report, and they told me he had given his 2 weeks about a month ago. I then tried calling George again, and he finally picked up. He told me he was okay, but he had moved states and no longer wanted any contact with his kids because it was all too much responsibility for him. I snapped at George and told him he couldn't just decide now that he didn't want to be a father. Then George told me he never wanted kids in the first place, and those kids don't look anything like me anyway. George then told me to buzz off and hung up the phone. After that, I informed the police what had happened to let them know that George wasn't in any danger and that we knew his whereabouts. After that happened, I just cried because I couldn't believe that I had raised such a selfish person. Susanna has filed for full custody, and George, as far as I know, is refusing to pay child support and will probably end up in jail at some point. Bethany is now 4 months pregnant and is having a boy, and George is the father. Somehow he managed to come up with the $500, so he will have to pay child support since he doesn't plan on being in the baby's life. Bethany moved into my home in November since she's had trouble doing things herself, and her doctor says she's at risk if she becomes too stressed during the pregnancy. In that time, we've gotten closer, and despite how our first meeting went, I actually have come to like Bethany. Sorry this isn't the happy ending some of you wanted. I've been following the advice I received from the first post, and I have not contacted George, and he's not tried to contact me. I can only hope with time he pulls himself together and manages to step up as a father. Thank you to everyone who gave helpful advice. Would I be the jerk for telling my friend I won't pet sit because of a stipulation her husband made? I, 30 female, have a friend, 30 female, we'll call her Cass, who asked me to watch her and her husband's, David, their pets, which are 2 cats and 2 dogs, from the 22nd to the 27th of December for them to spend time with family. David's mom bought plane tickets for them to visit for Christmas, and David had planned on having one of his friends watch the pets. Apparently, David and this friend had a falling out over League of Legends, and he burned that bridge with a very vicious comment. Cass asked me if I would be willing to watch the pets for them for the same amount they would have paid the other friend, $500. Cass also offered to cover my gas since I live about 40 minutes away without traffic, but would usually be around 1 to 1.5 hours due to traffic. I agreed to help pet sit under the impression that I would be going back and forth from my house to hers. I asked to meet with the pets before and get any information I needed in their care, etc. So we set a date to do that about 3 weeks before they left. We met up and I made lots of notes and also wanted to meet her husband so he knew who was taking care of his pets and house while he was away. It was while I was on this visit that I learned that they wanted me to stay at the house overnight while they were gone and be at the house a good part of the time. They were willing to offer their food and use of their entertainment services on their TV. This was fine with me as I thought it was fair and such. Now, I had only been dealing with Cass up to this point, and I barely met her husband for 2 to 3 minutes for the first time ever, since he was asleep till noon and was focused on building furniture that just came in when he was awake. Now things went downhill this afternoon because Cass wanted to talk since she was having anxiety about leaving her cat that she brought into the relationship. She has been at home with all of the pets since she quit her job earlier this month, and even before that would visit and let them out during lunch, which is also something David would do as well. To help quell her anxiety, I talked with her and got the last bit of info she wanted to relay. One was a stipulation David wanted to tack on, which was me not leaving the pets more than 3 hours. I had already moved my work schedule for both of my jobs to accommodate for me staying overnight to watch the pets. However, I was under the impression that I would be able to leave the pets for a relatively normal amount of time that I would need to leave my own dogs alone for when I have work, 4 to 6 hours minimum. When I told Cass that I had planned to spend time with my significant other's family on the 24th and my own family on the 25th, but I would be willing to limit it only to my family's Christmas, since I knew that would be a bit too much time for both over 2 days, and 3 hours would not be enough time for presents, food, cleanup, dessert, and the 2+ hours needed to travel from their house to mine and back for my family Christmas. Since it was his stipulation, she needed to talk with him about it, but knew he'd get mad because I couldn't say yes to his stipulation. My friend said she would just stay home with the pets, which she knew would upset her husband as well. She texted me about an hour later, telling me he was mad and would allow the 6 hours I estimated, but would take off $50, and wrote things that were obvious things I would do taking care of the pets, as if I didn't have enough sense to do them in the first place. Now this upset me, since me spending time with my family on Christmas should not be a point of contention, and wanting to be honest about the amount of time it should take should not be up for debate. If this was such an important point, it should have been mentioned when I was getting all of the other information, and not days before they leave. I originally planned to counter, since the amount I would be paid per hour would be $3.47, and so for 6 hours to be deducted, it would be about $20, and just say he could take that off. But honestly, his disregard for me wanting to celebrate with my family while he goes out to visit his own is just really unrealistic. So, would I be the jerk for telling them they need to find someone else? Not the jerk. You've been very accommodating, and the husband, at least, seems manipulative. I would be curious what their relationship is like, because your friend seems a bit wary of her husband. OP. To be honest, I've been uncomfortable with him since they started dating 5 or 6 months ago. They got married at the end of October or beginning of November because she got pregnant, and she officially moved into his house a month before that. He seemed to rush everything, and she seemed to be swept up in that alarmingly quick. Exactly. OP needs to understand that she has the power in this transaction here. She needs to tell them to forget his stipulations and find someone else. Today is the 19th. They're not going to find any pet boarders this late, and likely not going to find anyone willing to do this. Instead of him docking the pay, I'd tell them to pay more. For 4 pets over 5 days and affecting her holidays, $500 isn't enough. Of course, I don't expect the husband to be rational, considering he's a 30-year-old who had a falling out with a friend over League of Legends. OP. When he decided to cut the $50 off the original compensation, I knew immediately he did it out of anger and to try and manipulate me into doing what he wanted by scaring me into it. He thought he could control me the way he does anything else. However, I have a lot of experience with emotionally immature behaviors and refuse to play whatever game they want. Update. I'm sure many of you are wondering what I did in this situation, and I decided not to pet sit for them. I messaged my friend this morning telling her, I honestly don't think I'm the right fit for you and your husband for pet sitting now. I'm sorry, but you guys need to find someone else. This was a difficult decision to make, but I just do not feel comfortable now with the turn of events that have occurred. So far, she hasn't responded. I'm perfectly fine with this because I don't think having her and her husband is something I want. I'm a recovering people pleaser and really needed to know that my boundary was reasonable. But your support really helped me see this. I will be enjoying my Christmas stress-free with my family and my own dogs. I will also be spending time celebrating with my significant other and my very, very supportive friends. Some things that I also wanted to address. I've been friends with her for about 15 years. 11 of those have been long distance, and we haven't been that close in recent years. She's only known her husband for 6 months, and they've been married for 3 of those. They did not have a ceremony, but went to City Hall to get married, so I didn't have the chance to meet him before checking out the pets. I'm worried about her being in this marriage, because since she is pregnant and seemed to be swept up very quickly with him. I had been on alert about him since he had her meet his son on their second date, which also made me question his parenting as well. His blow-up with his friend that was supposed to pet sit wasn't over a single game, but over them thinking he cheated on rank games since he did worse when playing with them, and he said it was because he played with them for fun. Am I the jerk for telling my mom I'm staying with my dad full-time until I don't have to share my room? I, 15 female, live 1 week with my dad and another with my mom. They divorced 3 years ago, and my mom has been dating John for a year. John and I don't hate each other, but we're not close. We all live in the same town as most of my dad's side of the family, so other than my music lessons, I also hung out a lot with my cousins and didn't spend a lot of time around John. A month ago, John and his daughter, Trisha, who's 11, moved in temporarily into my house because there was a fire at theirs. My house has 2 bedrooms, so Trisha has to stay in my room. My bed is a bunk bed because I was getting a sister, but my mom lost them. Trisha and I hung out only a few times before this, but I can say the same about her and John. I don't hate her, but she turns out to be hard to live with. She has long hair and her hair is everywhere. She talks in her sleep, and I was woken up 5 or 6 times since her stay. She also sometimes tried to speak to me when I already turned off my lamp, a sign that I was going to sleep. I talked to my mom, and she said I needed to be nicer to her since she's been through a lot, that my issues were just minor inconveniences, that Trisha would be back at her own home soon, in late January. I talked to my dad, and he said I could just move in with him until Trisha leaves. I then packed my bags and told my mom I'll be staying at Dad's. She blew up at me, saying what a spoiled brat I am and that I'm making John and Trisha feel horrible for imposing. I just left. It's been a week now, and my mom never reached out to me. She dropped my Christmas presents at my grandma's because my dad and I would celebrate Christmas there. I don't think my mom can get the law involved because I'm 15, and I just have to tell them the living situation and they should understand. Besides, it's only till I can have my room back again. Still, am I the jerk? Not the jerk, but your dad should have had a conversation with your mom and he went about this the wrong way. As a family court attorney, I have a different view on much of this. In my state, if your mom got the law involved, you could be made to return. I'm often asked if at 12, 14, or 16, can I make the decision where I live, or my kid can pick? The answer is the court will consider your wishes in my state, but not let you pick. In the same way, if you pick your dad, your mom can't just turn off paying support or disown you. There are rights and responsibilities involved. People too often think every case is a reasonable teen who can pick, and forget that if the law freely allowed kids to just pick sides, that it would be really easy for kids to play parents completely off each other and end up with zero supervision. All this is to say, I think you have some real feelings. I think people should listen to you. I don't think either of your parents are acting like adults. I, male 32, think I saw my baby's chart and I can't be the father. My wife is 30. We had a difficult birth. Everything is fine, mother is recovering, and the baby is doing well. I went to talk to the nurse and a chart was up on the computer. I think they listed our baby as type B blood. There was a lot on the screen, a lot going on, and my head was swimming, so I'm not certain that's what it said, and I'm not even certain that was our kid's chart. We're both type A. We donate blood, so I'm 100% certain of our blood types. It doesn't immediately register, but I checked, and that shouldn't be possible, meaning I'm not the father if our baby has type B blood. I'm not sure what to do next. Should I ask my wife? She's still recovering, and I don't want to stress her out unnecessarily. Can I ask the hospital to see the chart? We're already home. Do I just get a home paternity test and wait to get the results? Edit. I called the hospital this morning, and they told me how to access the web portal and get the lab results. Blood type is listed as B, but there is no Rh factor listed, positive or negative. So I was right in what I was seeing, but the info is incomplete or inaccurate. 2 A parents can have an A or an O baby. All the other theories are basically impossible, including hospitals switching the baby. There are only 2 realistic possibilities, in order of what I think most likely. 1, the labs are wrong, or 2, I'm not the father. I'm not going to talk to my wife about this because it doesn't lead anywhere good right now. Oh, for goodness sake, just ask the nurse what your baby's blood type is. If there's one thing I've learned from Reddit, it's you should immediately accuse your wife of cheating. Go stay with your mom and get your mom to also accuse your wife of cheating. Then get a paternity test, and when it comes back that you are the father, You get mad at your wife for being mean about it and blow up your marriage. Please don't forget to also have all of your friends and relatives blow up her phone. I called out my brother's girlfriend for being a gold digger after she Googled the cost of our Christmas gifts. My brother James has a girlfriend, Lindsay, who he's been dating for 7 months. He decided to bring her to Christmas at my house, stay over Christmas Eve, and leave the next day after lunch. I had met Lindsay at drinks before this, and she seemed nice. When they arrived, Lindsay walked in and complimented my decorations, large tree in the foyer, and asked how much they cost. I was a bit surprised by the question, but I just said, more than I'd like, and moved on. Throughout the evening, she asked several questions centered around money. She asked my husband how much he paid for our house, my stepdad how much money he made in his previous job, how much my watch cost. She even Googled one of our art pieces to see how much it sold for, and started talking about how crazy it was that we spent that much, which frankly was very uncomfortable. My stepdad pulled my brother aside and asked if there was a problem, but my brother just said it was normal for her to do that, but he did say he'd speak to her about it. On Christmas morning, we all gathered around to open presents, and thankfully, Lindsay hadn't said anything else, so I figured James had spoken to her about her intrusive questions. However, at lunch, we were talking about plans for January, and Lindsay proudly said she didn't know how we could afford to do anything in January as she added up the total we had spent on gifts, and then proudly proclaimed the total amount. The whole table went silent, and honestly, I was equal parts shocked and annoyed that someone could be so ignorant. I looked at Lindsay and said, "You are the world's most diligent gold digger. Seriously, would you like to be the family accountant since you're already tracking expenses?" Lindsay stuttered out an apology and tried to explain, but my stepdad just changed the conversation and we moved on. She was mercifully quiet for the rest of dinner. After they left, my brother messaged me saying that I'd really upset Lindsay and I was out of line with what I said. I argued that he had said he had talked to her and he clearly didn't. Not that someone should have needed guidance to know how crass her comments were. He's saying I owe both of them an apology, but I think Lindsay's behavior was disgraceful. My parents say Lindsay was wrong, but I probably should have said something in private, or they could have, and I shouldn't have said something in front of everyone. Am I the jerk? All of these everyone sucks heroes and you're the jerk replies are dumbfounding. Have any of you people ever had an interaction with an actual human being? In what world is asking people about how much money they make and adding up the totals of Christmas gifts normal? Not the jerk. She was being incredibly rude and obviously making everyone uncomfortable. I just don't understand why everyone here is making excuses for her, semantics of the terminology or not. Why would you sit there and add up the total of what a family spent and then tell them about it? They know. Whether you grew up with money or not, common sense is required, unless she's on the spectrum, which is the common excuses the "you're the jerks" and "everyone sucks here" people are giving. But come on, people here always get defensive when someone posts here and is from a wealthier background, constantly making excuses. If this was reversed, would you guys be okay with it? If she Googled how much a pair of socks or how much an old TV was and passed a comment, if she went on about how little the family spent and then declared at Christmas morning, "Oh, you guys should have loads of money in January since you spent so little during Christmas," would you all be making the same comments? I doubt it. You'd be up in arms and calling her a snob. Not the jerk, and I really don't get the people saying you are the jerk. It's so unbelievably rude to make so many comments about money. I could see maybe 1 or 2 offhanded comments, but to fixate on money so much that you tally up how much money was spent on Christmas presents and then announce it to the whole family? Don't apologize to your brother. Why should you? His girlfriend came into your house for Christmas and immediately started questioning you about money and practically appraising everything in your house. She should be apologizing to you, and your brother should be apologizing on her behalf. If someone is rude to you, you're allowed to defend yourself and shut them down, which is what you did. Maybe next time she'll learn to keep her mouth shut and not constantly talk about money. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or their brother's girlfriend? Please let us know. How much did you pay for that suit, Reddit boy? Anything over $20 and you got ripped off. Am I the jerk for removing the door to my son's room indefinitely? Yesterday, while I was making lunch, I heard a really loud sound, as if the ceiling was falling or a bookshelf had fallen. My husband, 41, male, and our daughter, 17, were out. The only other person in the house was my son, who's 16. I was pretty sure he was in his room, which is at the opposite side of the house from the kitchen. So while making my way there, I checked every room and everything seemed in order. I knocked on my son's door and called his name. No answer. I must have knocked and called 3 times before trying to open the door, which was locked. At this point, I was getting really freaked out, thinking that maybe he had tipped his wardrobe or bookshelf and it had fallen over him and he was passed out on the floor. I was basically screaming his name, but no answer. I have no idea how I did it. I just threw myself into the door and it broke. Now, clearly the door was already weak. I'm thinking termites. But yeah, it broke. My son was fine. He was freaked out about the door, but he was fine. The sound was his TV with the volume at the max, apparently, and he didn't answer me calling because he didn't want me bothering his movie. His words were, "You were screaming like a harpy and it was annoying. I was trying to watch the movie. Fix the door." I said no. I wasn't going to fix it, since to fix it, I would have to buy a new door, and doors are expensive. And as soon as his dad got home, he would remove the door entirely as it was too broken to just stay there. He got really mad, said it's his right to have a door. He deserves his privacy. I said he had a door, and while I was the one that broke it, it was a consequence of his actions. So if he wanted a door, he would have to buy it. I know he doesn't have the money for it right now. Until then, no door. He can change in the bathroom. He said, "Forget you." I said he was grounded. Am I the jerk about the door? My husband is fine with it, says only I know how scared I was, so only I can know the appropriate punishment. I'm now terrified that if anything happens where we really need to reach my son, we won't be able to. But I have calmed down since, and I'm wondering if I'm the jerk. Not the jerk. Replace the door, remove the TV from his room. You would be the jerk for not getting him a new door. He needs privacy. He doesn't need a TV. Think of different and better ways to discipline that don't remove his privacy and space. Kids typically don't need a TV. If he didn't answer because of the TV, take that away and not his door. I usually say parents are always jerks for taking away doors, but this, absolutely not the jerk. But you and your husband need to sit down and think about how to fix your son's behavior ASAP because he's way out of line. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her son? Please let us know. Yowza, having a son that acts like that, no wonder some folks are deciding they don't want to have kids. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.